Hello and welcome back to the Captain's Table. This is the question and answer session with AttiraKell and Tree0311. Talking with, if you missed the previous episode, I'm probably titling it A Military Perspective, where we talked with them about various aspects of Star Citizen and coming at it from the perspective of two former military members and what can CIG see in the future for CIG for things to incorporate, as well as missing vehicles or missing pieces of the puzzle for this sort of experience that they're trying to craft. So it's a great conversation. So it'll be, if you missed it and you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be right above Kell's head. There'll be a little link there. It'll pop out right now and you can click that and watch that first. But if you're watching this live, you can just roll back and watch the previous episode if you need to. So with that all being said, let's answer these questions. These are all questions from the chat that I've asked live. If you too want to ask live, if you're watching this after the fact, make sure that you come join us at twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, to ask your own questions. With that all, let's get started with the first question from Crystal King, who asks, what are the most powerful weapons known in lore? Can the antimatter weapon render an entire planet uninhabitable? I think it's more of a question for me. But yes, it's called Tomb. There's a world, I can't remember if I think it's in the Grinder, which I can't remember which one that is. If that's
Tiber,
yeah. It's Tiber 2. For those who don't know, in lore, the UEE has been getting its ass kicked left, right, and center by the Vanduul. And in a desperate last attempt to stop the attacks of the Vanduul on Tiber, the Imperator ordered a basically glassing of the planet, where they did orbital bombardments of antimatter weapons onto the planet, which rendered the planet literally uninhabitable. That's why they call it now Tomb, because it's just a grave of human and Vanduul soldiers and warriors who've been fighting on the planet, because it's just nothing's there.
They have concept art for what it looks like now, and I think that's the only mention in lore of them using antimatter bombs.
Yeah,
it was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Because it used to be a planet that they were colonizing. I think it was like the only one that they were. But yeah, it's as far as that being the big bad, the equivalent of nuclear holocaust, the threat of that, that's the equivalent of that, and at least for the UEE, we're not Hadesians yet.
Yeah, not yet. Well, and in lore, there is mention of using antimatter torpedoes to blow up a large asteroid, something like the size of Delamar. But it would take it took like a squadron of fully loaded Retaliator bombers with antimatter weapons to destroy, to even attempt to destroy a small moon. So they're pretty powerful weapons, but they do require a lot of chain usage. You have to use a lot of them in one place to, like, there's no like Death Star. Yeah, there's no Death Star that's going to blow up an entire planet, but you can render a planet basically uninhabitable, but you need a lot of those weapons. So all right, next question comes from Del Ener, who asks, what are your dream specs for an assault carrier? And do you think we could get different sized versions, like a Banner Merchantman size or Javelin sized? I'll start with you, Tree, on this one, because I know this is your ship.
This is my shtick. Yeah, I deployed on, I've deployed on LPDs and LHDs. So Google what those are. And so people are, a lot of people are always like, oh no, you could never have that be player ownable size. And I'm like, yes, you absolutely could. They're really not that big. Yeah, I'm going to get on my soapbox, but my dream would be, the hangar for the Idris is only a little bit too small for a Valkyrie. But if you want it to be too metric, and I wrote down all the numbers, but if you had, basically two chained together, or like a lengthwise hangar for two Valkyries, it wouldn't be any longer than an Idris. The problem with the Idris is it has a whole bunch of stuff that sticks out past the hangar. And so you could have it be Idris in length, or maybe a little bit in length, if you wanted it to be able to carry two Valkyries, especially if you wanted room for in between those Valkyries to have a lift from below the hangar to the cargo bay. And so if you imagined an Idris style hangar but larger for 2 Valkyries with a lift behind each Valkyrie that accesses a cargo bay beneath it, that would be probably C2 size, maybe a little bit bigger, like 800 to 1000 SCU. But if you think about it in length as well as verticality, that way you could store a Nova Tonk. You could have your standard Valkyrie plus one for carrying a larger vehicle. You could have some smaller vehicles down there. You could have all your crates for all your logistical supplies we've all talked about. And so your dimensions lengthwise would be Idris to Kraken size. Your dimensions height-wise and width-wise would also be Kraken size, because you have that cargo area that's not insignificant, but certainly not Kraken sized underneath your hangar. And then if you ever look at like a 3D cutaway of an LPD or an LHD, you'll see that the interior, where all the vehicles and all your big containers are, that goes right in the middle, and then the sides, you have all your berthings and a lot of your rooms until you get to the top deck. So basically, what we always called it in the Marines is that was the green side, is the back end that's alongside the your what would be your hangar or your well deck. You'd have your barracks for your Marines. You'd have more storage, maybe your medical bay, your brig, that sort of stuff. And then on top of the hangar is where you'd have your blue side, or in this case, UE Marines would be all green. But your shipper operations aspect, where the ship the crew for the ship is, where the your
Stations are.
your bridge, your bridge, your stations, that sort of stuff. The part that isn't associated with the landing itself and the troops themselves. And then if I really had my druthers, if you look at the Bengal, how it has that the sort of flat top part with just pads and a hanger at the back end. If you just had 2 pads on top of the ship, and maybe you have like a raised bridge, kind of like the Idris behind it. But that way you could have 2 escort fighters, acting as a CAP, Combat Air Patrol, on top, to be carried with it in the same manner that the Liberator does. I think that you could easily have something like that carries, 20 to 40 troops, along with the vehicles that they need to go with them, and all their supplies and everything that you need to support them. And not just for troops. Like we talked about, you wouldn't just use this for, landing an infantry company and doing ground operations. Think of how many, whether it's doing logistical things or mining ground vehicles in some place where you can't bring a ship down, because that's going to be a thing. Anything that your org or your group of players is wanting to do, where you need a mobile base and you're going from planet side to space and back, you've got it. And I think that having that in surplus, like maybe, we know that the Idris and the Javelin are both surplus ships, that the Navy has, sold them, because they have lots of them, and there's no reason that this wouldn't be surplus as well. The U.S. Navy surplused, an ungodly amount of LSTs back in the day. And a lot of people think that these ships aren't common, and it's just because you don't see them, because they don't have the sex appeal that an aircraft carrier or a nuclear submarine, or a destroyer does.
Oh, come on.
To me, I find them attractive because they thick.
Well, and it's funny because
if you
mentioned that like most of the world's navies don't have super carriers. Most of them, but almost all of them have at least one.
None of them do.
Yeah,
I don't know that
ships.
any of them has super carriers the way we do.
Yeah, but everybody has, most of the larger navies in the world have an LHD, have multiple LHDs, and every smaller navy has LPDs, whether they're their own builds or they're ones that they bought off of the US, or whoever. They are super common, and a lot of them are surplus. Some of them are new builds, but they're everywhere because they're so utilitarian. And that's why this would be so great for so many things, is it isn't just for, oh, I'm going to put a whole bunch of Marines on it and we're going to go take your crayons. It's, you can use it for a ton of different things. And, it's a great support ship. It is the ultimate logistical ship in reality, because it carries everything you need, including your people, your beans, bullets, and bandages, your smaller logistical craft being the Valkyries. That's my dream.
And I talked about my concept and Tree brought that up, and I was like, yeah, basically this. You just need a civilian version of that, because the reality is that many people will want to build a base somewhere in deep space. They'll want to have their pyro base because of, either just because they want to have a pyro base, or because they can see some logistical support where they can build a base and they can say, hey, you know what? People need fuel in pyro. There is nowhere friendly in pyro. If we build a fuel depot right here, we can make money because people will have to stop by and get our fuel. But to do so in the kind of way that CIG has right now is very piecemeal. You'd have to send out like dozens, if not hundreds of ships over and continue to build it up over time, not just a Pioneer. But if you had something like this, you would need a Pioneer in one of these ships. And one of these ships would effectively act as like a mobile base where someone could sit there, they could log out in the bed, they could get back up when they get back logged on, they can continue to work, and then the Pioneer just does the factory building. And this is just more of the support, keeps all the materials coming in and going, making sure people have food, make sure people have a bed, make sure you have all the other supplementary ships that can, protect you and all that sort of thing. So, yeah. Kel, do you want to tack that, or because I think that was definitely a Tree question.
Yeah. So I will say in the chat, right?
Because it came from Dell.
Yeah.
More than one country has carriers. Obviously, UK has carriers, right? China has built a carrier. They've purchased. I think there's one or two other countries that have built carriers. When we say super carrier, we're talking about just
a floating city.
The obsceneness that is 5,000 people floating in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic, doing donuts. Where there's altogether different. I would only say, so we're talking about just because that was a very mighty fine soapbox you climbed on, and I respect all of it. And of course, what you described to me sounded very much like something that is needed in verse. Because a lot of people don't understand that amphibs are the size or larger than destroyers in most cases because they have to do so much. But it was an amphibious assault ship. Is that what the question was?
Yes, it's the question is a assault carrier.
Oh, assault carrier. Okay.
Yeah.
My hot take was that you have an assault carrier and it's the Kraken.
Yeah.
How dare you?
It is basically basically an America class amphib. It carries roughly the same amount of ships. You could absolutely put a ship on there to take ground people to the look at his face. But that's
I'm going to get back up on my soapbox and I'm going to throw crayons at you. The biggest thing is it has to. You do not bring it to shore. We learned this lesson in World War II.
Yeah.
The Kraken, in order to bring things to shore, has to land. And oh god, you can.
You're right.
Right now, can you imagine?
To be fair, it would be pretty. I mean, it would be hard to land, but once it was there, it would be a pretty big fortress.
Yeah.
The Kraken, I think, is much more akin to what you were referring to as being actual ro-ro. Maybe not in the form of ramps, but you can bring, because it has, what is it, like 4,000 some odd SCU with those giant cargo lifts. Yeah. You can probably fit multiple Nova tanks and whatever else in there, and everything else you need. As far
assuming you can get it out, because an America class amphib probably has an equivalent amount of storage. The issue is it underneath the flight deck, and you wouldn't be able to get any of that cargo out. So
and that's like the whole, that is the role of the Valkyrie in this in this verse is to be able to move those things from those sorts of ships and whatever else. But the Kraken could totally do what you're talking about with the Ro-Ro ferry for like civilian purposes. Would the UE Navy use a Kraken? No, but your civilians could.
Yeah, the hate Drake. They wouldn't buy it even just with anything with the Jake sticker on it, let alone. But yeah, I guess you're saying.
Yeah, it's not a military. It would have to be from somebody like Anvil or.
Mm-hmm. But if you're landing on far away from whoever, or if it isn't a combat operation, you can totally use a Kraken to do all that sort of stuff and operate as a base. It is a thing. It just wouldn't be the Marine way of doing it. And Drake and Castec Arms are if you have UEC, we have wares. When it comes to all those sorts of things, but that's it's the same thing as like if you were doing a cost benefit analysis logistics wise, and you wanted the more cost effective way of doing that, a Kraken it might be better than this military. I hate to use the word, but mil spec, mil equivalent. It might be cheaper to operate a Kraken and land farther away, and then unload your tanks and whatever, than to fly the Aegis or Anvil that is much more costly to maintain.
Sure.
It's sort of like the SCU per dollar chart thing out there. It would be the same thing but for vehicles.
And for anybody who wants to know why I kind of flinched at the idea of having a Kraken land stuff, is that take a look at their actually concept art of the Kraken landed.
Oh yeah,
that thing huge. It's the size. It's so big. Like right now, try to find a piece of land that's flat enough or even level enough to land a Kraken anywhere in the verse. It would be damn near impossible.
Plains of Daymar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would take up the entirety of like the flats of like Eager Flats would be entirely filled up by one Kraken.
Mm-hmm.
But I respect your vision for what it is, so I won't add on to my own.
All right,
we'll take you with us. Don't worry.
I'm there for it, man. I'm there for it. Let's go.
Next question comes from Death Trooper 177, who asks your thoughts on should ships or vehicles be restricted to roles, or should they build a ship and then have players decide how to use them and not limit them and be more modular? Basically, do you think that ships should be more modular, where you have the modules that you can fill the roles in, or more restricted ships and less like multi-role ships? What do you think?
That's a really interesting question. So when I released my video on bombing, I basically said, hey, CIG, almost every single fighter should be able to bomb, right? So give us bombs from size 1 to size 5 to start, okay? And then beyond that, we can play with how we want to do that, right? So if you elect to stick bombs on your Gladius instead of missiles, right, it becomes a small bomber, and you get the heads up display just like you would in the A2, and you can drop them. So I do think there should be some level of customizability with regard to combat function. However, there are some things in this world that doesn't work. So when you talk about EW platforms, right, you're not taking a Growler into dogfight. You're not some of these things, certain craft that are spec'd out for reconnaissance are not going to be, they're big, fat, juicy targets. They're not something that you're going to endanger if you can avoid it. So there is room for both specificity, especially when you talk about niche capability. But then when you talk about combat capability, I think there's a lot of room for diversity of function. So that's kind of where I'll go with that. So, Tree?
Yeah, I remember John Crew said something to the tune a while back of making ships modular is more difficult than making just variants or making different ships. I don't know how much stock I actually put in that statement, but I'm not a dev, so I'm not going to call into question what he actually said, as far as the way they build vehicles and ships. But I think that CIG is striking a balance of, this is a dedicated platform for this. We are making this, not role specific, but this is meant for this task. You can do other things with it. It just won't be nearly as good versus other things that are going to be much more utilitarian. And it's that's part of that player agency thing. Is, are you going to earn UEC in order to do something that's more specific, or are you going to earn UEC and reputation in order to get access to things that are more utilitarian? And it's just going to be up to you and up to what your goals are. If you really want to be competitive in dogfighting, you're going to want to get a good dedicated dogfighter. If you're not really interested in being super ultra competitive, or your target isn't that overwhelmingly challenging, it's totally fine to bring something that isn't the dedicated platform, to do that. It's um, I think CIG is trying to make to sort of split that difference between one trick ponies and more utilitarian craft. I think it's going to be really interesting when modularity actually makes it in game, whether they, hey, we've built the tech and we've got modularity working on the Retaliator, and we're building the modules for the Caterpillar, whether they decide to go back and revisit that idea and build more ships that are modular in order to give you more utility out of the ships that you own, or the ships that you're working towards. But it's really hard to speculate whether it's how much of it is a tech challenge for CIG, and how much of it is, hey, we're just going to walk the line and we're going to do build some things that are, do it all, the Nomad, the Cutlass Black, the Connie, those things, the Freelancer, those are super popular because they're, you can get a lot of gameplay out of them, but you're not going to win a dogfight against a Gladius unless the person in the Gladius isn't very good. But there's a lot of things that are going to mitigate how utilitarian those things are. Like for me, the Valkyrie is always going to be, the primo dropship. The Prowler is also going to be a good dropship because you need to carry people. You need to, that the whole role is carrying people and getting them to the site in one piece. And if they're falling down all over the ground, and hurting themselves as you're doing evasive maneuvers, it's not going to work. You can only, bring so many guns to the fight, sitting in your Freelancer or jammed in the back.
Sure.
So some things are going to be a little bit more hard limiting than others, but your general gameplay, I think, is going to be a little bit more flexible. And I think CIG is doing a decent job of that.
I did see something in the comments, and it piqued my mind. He said, "I want an ECM pod for my missile rack." Okay, yeah, absolutely. So less capability, right? It's not going to be, a full e-warfare suite built into,
like a Vanguard,
like a Vanguard system, yeah. But absolutely, you could have a much smaller range, and of course, that gets into what is EW. In Star Citizen, because EW is far more than an EMP pulse, and it does absolutely tie in some overlap with cyber, and more and more and more we get in there. But then you also get into reconnaissance, right? And the first ASO I ever did was on reconnaissance, because everything in combat starts with finding out where the enemy is and what he has. And right now, reconnaissance, if you were to do it, would be you using what?
BAMSIS, begin the planning, arrange for reconnaissance.
Yeah, there you go. So, you would kind of take the in-game camera, put it beneath your plane, and then, your ship, and fly, and then try and like take a screenshot as you go, right? And kind of get an idea of what the the ground looks like before you do it. Or you might fly into an area, get shot at by a bunch of ships, and then, bamf out, and then go tell your friends what's there and whatever. That's like the scope of reconnaissance right now. Or, I don't know, you could have a pod, right, that takes images for you and then keeps it in game, or it dumps it into your into a file on your computer that you can then access and upload to your friends on Discord so they can see what it is. But it serves as a game mechanic in that pod on your missile rack, and and then it leaves you open to things like the what is it? The Ghost is the stealth fighter, and the Tracker is the ISR element, right? Well, I think they're both, to me, ISR elements. It's a stealth. One is kind of like a mini AWACS, and one is like a stealth reconnaissance platform for me. I know it's a stealth fighter, but not really. Yeah. And so you go in there with the Anvil center mount with a good quality, IR, EO, radar collection platform in there. You can cut through the weather, any weather. You could do all kinds of stuff. Take imagery of the target, bamf that back to your team. You guys can make plans, especially for PvP mainly, right? You can look at what your opponent organization base looks like, and then you guys can plan around that and then conduct your attack, right? ECM pod, same thing. There's little things they could do to give us those capabilities. It's just it will never be as effective as a dedicated ship.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money with that, because things like if you have external missile racks versus the internal ones, like internal on the Scorpius versus external on, like, Gladius has external, and like Hornet has external. You've got your persistent hangar, and you can customize your hangar. You can have things in your hangar, whether it's modules and stuff, and you can come back and you can, hey, I've got this mission to do this, and it isn't a dogfighting mission. I'm not going to, or maybe there could be some dogfighting, but my job is to go drop some bombs, or my job is to go do like where you were talking about. And you can reconfigure your more versatile fighter craft versus, but it's going to have a bigger cross section than a ship that has the missiles and whatever
an Eclipse with size 9 bombs, right?
Yeah. Like if they make that a thing that affects player choice and player agency, I think expanding that beyond just full on modularity, I think that's a great way to go about it, with components and the ability to, hey, I can mount this or mount that with this ship, but this ship can't because it doesn't have external whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's spot on. Yeah.
I'm gonna ape both y'all said and just say the same thing. Like, there's no reason to separate the dedicated ships from multi-role ships, because multi-role ships will always have their spot and the dedicated ships will always have their spot. The issue is to make sure that all the ships that are dedicated are better at what they do, but they aren't the only ones limiting it.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the key. Because you need to be like personally, I think they should have mining attachments for other vehicles, so you can turn your freelancer into a miner if you wanted to. It's just not designed to do it, and it's going to blow up pretty quickly. But if you really wanted to do it, you could do it. If you wanted to, like, hey, I need something to just crack this rock and we'll just hoover this thing up and move it. You could do something like that. But there's that flexibility makes sense. Whereas having a bespoke, like an actual a mole is going to do a lot better and a lot more efficient than having to do 3 different ships trying to do the job of one. So
I think the best example of what you just mentioned is the sort of, there's a bit of a hubbub, or a brouhaha surrounding the Legionnaire, because people are like, oh great, I thought everybody you was going to be able to board, and it's like, no, you can still board other ships. This isn't the only ship that can do boarding. It's just going to be, it is dedicated for boarding. It is going to be better at boarding than something else. And that's a perfectly good reason to have something dedicated for it. Boarding is a very complex operation. I can tell you, I've done it. It's very difficult, and to have a dedicated boarding craft absolutely makes sense. Can you still board with, by going EVA and doing other things? Yes, that's what the Prowler's made for. That's how the Prowler came to be. But if you're trying to gain access via an airlock, then the Legionnaire is going to be give you a little bit of a leg up doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, I think people think getting on a ship in the middle of the ocean is like a super easy prospect when you think about like motion, height difference from that little ship you take over your boarding craft and all these other problems you deal with. It's like, oh man, sometimes that Legionnaire, when you don't have to fight gravity to board the ship, is going to be a game changer.
I'm an infantry marine by trade, but I'm a boat marine. So if you've ever watched the Navy SEAL commercials where they're riding around on those little black boats, that's what I did. I used to be a really good swimmer. Now I'm fat and very buoyant, but
still a good swimmer.
Still okay, not as fast. I'm a thick dolphin, but my second deployment, we spent a good amount of, after we retook Normandy, I spent a good amount of time off the coast of the Horn of Africa, and we retook several. We barely had to fire a shot because they saw us coming, but I've boarded pirate held ships via small rubber craft, as well as fast roping from a helicopter, and it is a insanely challenging proposition. And having a dedicated vehicle for that, in order to execute that process, absolutely makes sense in this universe. But you can still do it from your constellation. There's no reason you can't.
Yeah. But I mean, like, we even know today, like, eventually CIG is going to have the ability to turn off the gravity, and there'll be different things that a defender of a ship will be able to do to give themselves an advantage. And anyone who has any kind of inkling, even just basic study of how CQC works and CQB works in general, is those are very tight corridors, and there's a lot of death. You're going to walk down that corridor and die, like, instantly. So having something
CQB, like not fun.
Yes. So having something like a Legionnaire, which can board, and where they're not expecting you to come blowing through that door on your feet rather than upside down in all different ways, is a way that gives you that initial surprise element. And that's huge in any kind of conflict. Even in Star Citizen, if you see that person first, you're going to win, because you're going to be able to get that shot off faster than the other person is, and they're going to drop. And that's basically what the Legionnaire is. So sorry, just adding that to it. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is, we're good, but we're already 30 minutes in, and I've got 16 questions. All right. Death Trooper asks, do you think Death of a Spaceman will deter and limit military combat orgs from playing more aggressive style and playing it safe?
I mean, Eve guys throw their 15-year build it forever ships into combat and lose them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean,
I think it'll just reward military companies that prepare better, because if you are maneuvering as an infantry unit, right, you've got proper spacing, right, you've got proper formation, right, you've laid in your support by fire position, which has got your you've got overwatch of snipers, right, you're prepared to attack an objective, right, versus just zerging the freaking objective and waiting for them to gun you all down and laugh while they do it. I think you'll be rewarded. Mm-hmm.
But I as far as aggressiveness, I don't know.
Well, there's the old chestnut of violence of action, where, like, if you're aggressive, you're more of a chance to catch somebody unawares. Even if they're not in a good position, you can often overwhelm someone just by being in their face. And that even happens in Star Citizen or in video games all the time. People who are more aggressive can often overpower a better positioned opponent. But the key is, you also can't just pull out an axe and scream like a madman and just wildly fling it around, because you're just going to end up being killed.
So the main benefit of dying, though, is general reputation loss, right? I mean, it's
well, and it's not an instant death. It's like you have like several lives. So
several lives, and you'll look like a Borg by the time you're done. You'll have all kinds of mechanical appendages, and that's fine. But I mean, if the core functionality of dying is you lose the rep that you've spent so much time gaining, but all of your assets transition, your ship assets, your monetary assets transition to your follow-on character. I don't know that it's going to have a huge influence on milsim, aggressive military organizations, but maybe it will. Maybe if they really love their position with the UEE or some powered org or some other criminal organization, and they don't want to lose that rep.
So, being medical in nature, like I am a critical care flight paramedic. I've been doing medicine for 15, 16 years now. This is just my speculation. I don't think we are going to die at all like we do right now. Everybody's running around in armor. We have this fancy armor and everything, these fancy suits that keep out the vacuum of space and keep you warm. It is a easy mechanic for CIG to implement where you're down but you're injured, and your suit and your armor keeps you from dying and incentivizing players not to kill you but to take you prisoner. And so I think the biggest thing is you will be, the offending, the group that wins will have an incentive to capture you and stabilize you, whether it's bounties or something like that. They don't have to do all the work to turn it in. You simply call maybe you're in a semi-lawful system. You call 911, and we already had the tech for this, where they bring in the NPC reinforcements, and it's a Cutlass Steel, or not Cutlass Steel, sorry, Cutlass Blue flies down. Cutlass Steel. Oh gosh, Cutlass Blue flies down, and a couple of NPC cops walk out, and they drag the people that you have vanquished off, and they put them in the cryo, and off to Klesher you go. Yeah. I don't think people are going to be killed as often as they are just downed, but I think it will also incentivize you to retreat instead of being wiped out. But then we started off this conversation talking about logistics. That's what medicine is. Medicine, the Band-Aids part is a huge part of logistics, bringing a medic with you. But I think you're going to have to try to get killed. I think you're going to much more likely see injury much more frequently, and you're going to be incentivized to treat that injury, or whether it's a good guy or a bad guy. Paul, you've said it a million times, and it always rings true. Lore influences gameplay. I cannot count with how many fingers that I have the times where they have mentioned that if you off someone, if you straight up execute them, it doesn't bode well for you. I think you're going to be much more incentivized to capture people, for reputation base. It might just simply be a reputation thing. We're going to capture you and we're going to ransom you back. Yeah. And they've talked about this with the.
Sorry, but to that end, somebody in the chat said, but that's alts have a place in life, right? So, military focused aggressive organizations may just use alts as a means of bypassing the reputation, where their mains have really high rep and they can get the missions they want and the funds that they want and enjoy the gameplay that they want. And then if they're going to go into an org combat situation and really risk it all and put it on the line, then they upload an alt, they send it a bunch of money, and then get them out and away they go. So that's
also, I don't envy CIG fixing.
That's a risk
managing this.
There's also they can already track that though, so it'd be like the equivalent of sending a known terrorist lots and lots of money. You're going to piss off some people.
Oh, that's interesting to think about.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I like that.
So you'll lose reputation by sending an unwanted character money. They've even talked about that idea. So, and reputation is the second currency. A lot of people don't realize that reputation is going to matter a lot more than money, because money can buy you things, but if you can't even land to buy the thing you want to buy, then there's no point of having that money. And reputation is your ability to land at stations or even be able to fly through systems without being harassed the entire time because you just happen to kill the boss's daughter, or you just happen to, manage to take down a UEE Idris. Yeah, you're going to be hunted because they don't like you, because the reputation gets hit and it's going to be difficult for you to pull it back up. And that's why it's important to get that system right and get it really dialed in, because it will be the difference between people just going, lol, guy down, I'm going to shoot him, and someone going, grab him and pull him back with us so we now have, money to pay for. And he's just not going to, he's one less gun on the battlefield, so we don't have to worry about him right now.
I'm biased because I'm super interested in the medical gameplay, but I don't think the skill ceiling will be very high. And I think it won't be difficult to keep people alive and keep them mobile on their own with what CIG will be giving us as 900 years in the future medicine.
Well, it's a green beam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is for now. They
Beam
talked
citizen.
about making it more in the future. But if you haven't seen this, if you go into any of the hospitals, there are bags of plasma, in all the hospital rooms that you can interact with. I carry plasma on my helicopter right now. But if you have, if I don't like the beam thing, but I hope that it's more like an auto injector thing where, hey, I'm going to give you this, and this is your clotting factors, and this is going to stop you bleeding internally. And okay, now you're going to be a little slower, but I've stopped your bleeding, and now I'm going to give you some concentrated, packed red blood cells.
And they're going to simulate that with a shaky hand simulator, because you got to run the guy in IV.
Yeah,
it is your hand shaking as you come across, and you're like, oh, I gotta get in the vein.
It is so easy to, and CIG, if you're listening, please, I'll do this work for free to work out the mechanics for you. But it is so easy to say, inject this, stops bleeding. Inject this, treats shock, from poisoning. Inject this, replace red blood cells to, make it so that you're not as weak. And then you're just doing more of that once you get somebody back to the med bed, and I'm going to insert this packet of whole blood into the med bed, and the med bed's going to do the work. I'm going to insert this packet of clotting factors, and the med bed's going to put it where it needs to go in order to stop you from, clotting from this internal wound, to fix what your suit already stemmed. That is so easy from a sci-fi point of view.
Should have all that in it. You just have to keep it stocked.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't stock up your med bed before you go do a bunker mission, woe to you. But
yeah.
And we already know at least some of that is possible, because we already seen with the Banner Merchantmen the fact that they have an entire section behind the med bed where you're supposed to keep the supplies for the med bed, keep it going. And you can even see it right now. CIG accidentally turned it on where the med beds are actually containers. You can actually store stuff inside of a med bed.
That's pretty cool.
So
hopefully they give you a shower for when you get out of the Banu goo, and you don't want that to affect your reputation.
Oh yeah, because you smell like goo. Can you imagine though? Gosh, the complexity of how many chemicals you got to buy to keep your tier 2 med bed in your Carrack up and running, so it can clone you when you die.
Yeah,
that's
the limiting factor.
Tier 1.
Yeah,
tier 1. You're all wrong.
No, tier 2. Give it to me, tier 2.
Yeah. It's gonna happen with tier 2.
It's a premier exploration vessel. I really think that if you drive that bad boy all the way out in the middle of freaking hell's nowhere, and you freaking lose that ship because it doesn't have a respawn capability, I would be okay with it.
To get on my soapbox and give you the people's elbow from a foot up.
No,
tier 1. I swear to God.
I would be okay with you being able to pay a crap ton of money to refit your Carrack with a tier 1. Right? A little bit of modularity there. So you could start with a tier 2, and it can just kind of heal you up a little bit and do that. But
the only reason I don't think it'll be tier 2 is just because I think that the injury is going to be so much more common. If I thought that we were going to die frequently, I would say, lots of tier 1s. But, the tier 1 is you're going to go regen, and you're going to go regen at the spawn point, that you set. But, this is the consequence aspect of it. If you full on die after flying your Banu Merchantman deep into null, that's 120 AU across, and you haven't updated your imprint, and or your imprint is stored in Stanton, woe be to you. But that's player agency, that's player choice. These are logistics. Or you just contract that out. Hello, they are private military. Well, not private military. This is my goal in game, is to do what I've worked with these organizations in the past. But there are kind of like private military organizations, but they are full. All they do is medicine, remote medicine. They operate field hospitals in the most remote of places. That's what they get paid to do. So that way you can do all these things that we're talking about in SC. You do that on planet Earth right now, but far from your university hospital in London, or Washington, DC. But, you get paid, and you get paid a whole lot of money to provide, first world medical care in third world places, and
you just described the Apollo.
Totally going to be that. Yeah, that's what the Apollo, your Endeavor, yeah.
Is the Apollo gonna? I can't remember. Does the Apollo have a tier 1 bed?
You can swap out. You can swap out.
See, but swapping it out. So if you're telling me that if an Apollo, which is like can swap it out, I think other large capable ships should have that same functionality of swap out.
But that's what we're talking about with the specialization versus utility.
The
Apollo
I didn't say it would
is specialized.
Cheap. I wouldn't say it would. Yes. But I'm a Carrack owner. Come on, man. Right? Like the Carrack is a deep space exploration vessel, right? I mean, it's a specialized vessel as well. And I don't know that.
So don't die.
Well, yeah, that's an option. We'll see where they go with it. I'm just saying, I think charging me 2 million AUEC or UEC when the game launches to update, a single function of my ship. Is a worthy goal for a ship owner.
Yeah,
and I could also see. I can also see the tier 2 being a respawn bed in the same way that a tier 1 is, but a tier 1 is like you got to respawn on tier 1. This is what it's designed to do. It functions with it. It's efficient. It doesn't use a lot of resources, or it uses the resources wisely. Whereas a tier 2, it's like an emergency respawn. We're like, it's not going to do well.
And you're jacked up, and maybe you don't have an arm.
You're going to lose. You're going to lose like tons of viability score. Your viability score is going to tank if you use a tier 2, but you won't be dead. You won't be the big dead. So that would be the trade-off as well, of being like, I'm at 50% viability. If I respawn, I will be at 2% viability, and the next time I die, I am dead. Or I can take the hit and go back to wherever I'm supposed to be going, and my viability score is now like at 45 instead of 55. So it's like, do I really need to save my Carrack right now?
I think people are very worried about having to go, in this instance, go all the way back to, say Orison, the hospital in Orison when you big die in Pyro. And I am fully anticipating, and this is, I don't have any, other than I'm fully anticipating there being NPC organizations that are operating endeavors, out in the black, where hey, this is on your somewhere on your new star map, not the old star map because you'd never be able to click on it, but the new star map will have hey, you'll have a way where, okay, I want to transfer my my imprint to this endeavor that's way out here, and I don't have to go all the way back here. It's going to cost me more. You're going to need to pay more, or an Apollo, whichever. But have that option to be able to do that. Just kind of like whether it's repair for your ship. So you don't have to. If you're in null, maybe you're not going to be able to take delivery of a new ship, after it's been insurance claimed, and no one's going to drive it out there to you in the middle of null, way out in the middle of nowhere. But, if your ship gets severely damaged, I fully expect there to be NPC, AI organizations where you can be like, hey, I need you to come get me. It's going to cost you a ton of money. That's what insurance is for. Same thing. I fully expect you to have insurance in order to cover these things and be able to pay for it. But to me, it's if we make it so that you can only spawn at that you can spawn at a tier 2 bed, I think that's taking away gameplay from people like me who want to be able to operate their own endeavor doing the same thing,
Yeah.
And you can pick and choose. Okay, I'm trying to undercut the Imperial Health Services endeavor, here, and charge less in order to get more business. That sort of thing.
All right, let's move on to the next question because we still have a lot of questions left. I'm going to start skipping some of these, but Ionic Echo asks, we have the Perseus. What other ship manufacturer would you like to see produce a brawler type ship that engages other ships at close range with big guns? I mean, Anvil. And that's Anvil's MO. We have lots of armor and lots of guns.
First paragraph from the Liberator lore says synonymous with massive warships and large-scale troop and vehicle transports. So Anvil, Paul, you've mentioned it many times, but Anvil is almost sort of supplanting Aegis, however you want to say it.
It is, yeah.
And so I fully expecting us to get Anvil, hey, this is the new Anvil this, or newer Anvil this, or now it's available to the public, but you're replacing the Aegis so-and-so, the aging Aegis so-and-so. And so I definitely think Anvil, RSI totally could as well. The other, I screenshot this many times, but in the Polaris brochure, they talk about the Polaris is one of a line of new Corvettes or Corvette class ships. So I'm fully expecting more Corvettes from everybody, but especially RSI, because they literally said it. So
for subcaps though, I would love to see to see an Anvil subcap in the area of the Hammerhead and Perseus. We absolutely need a couple of options on Corvettes, because when you think about it, for most medium and small orgs, that's probably the largest ship they'll be able to run efficiently and effectively. And it still has a hike. I mean, God bless. The Perseus requires 4 people, I think, tops to run everything. And I think the Polaris is like, what is it, 30? It's a lot more.
It's like
it's like 12 to 24.
Yeah. So it's a lot more. And so, I think there should be some diversity of option there. And you could certainly have one be gun focused, kind of like the Perseus is, or the Polaris is missile focused, and that's fine.
It's torpedoes.
I really like the Polaris. Well, torpedoes, but missiles, torpedoes. Yeah.
I'm gonna we can cater to everybody. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say you could also see I could also see gunboats, which are more missile focused rather than gun focused, where you have just a sheer amount of stupid anime style missiles where you're firing 400 missiles at a target and they just can't dodge it.
Gosh, for that, just to build on that for a second. Stop putting missile boxes on top of the damn ship, right? Like, that is stupid. We have vertical launch systems now, and they can shoot in any direction that the ship wants it to, right? I mean, it's a flat surface, it's a vertical launch system, right? Come on, you've already got the system where if you turn your head, right, you can still lock on even if you don't get the heads up display, and the missile will kind of arc off towards the target, right? The missile operator should just be able to, and it's a dedicated station for a ship like this, should be able to, 360 lock onto a target, and he should just freaking death blossom.
Yeah.
Right. And the effort for the crew is reloading those from underneath. And it can be partially automated or it could not. But I mean, God bless, with the stupid missile boxes that rotate on top of the ship. That's absolutely ridiculous. Like, just VTOL or a flat vertical launch system. You could have one on top, one on bottom, and they just freaking pop the missile out and it shoots off in the direction it's supposed to. And that would absolutely be a fantastic ship. You have like 400 size 2 missiles. And maybe you can launch 10 at a time, and it's just a death blossom of stupid, and it would be amazing.
It'd be a logistical nightmare, but it would also be nothing can stop you when you start going.
Well, yeah, but when you're out, you're out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
that's like your only offensive armament. Everything else is defensive. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got some point defense stuff, and that's it, right? And if they defeat all of your missiles, right, with countermeasures or whatever, now you're just kind of like, okay, it's time to leave now before we die.
The enemy comes at you like, oh gosh, I've run out of men.
Yeah.
the other thing, and this is going to cater to some people in chat, but I think it'd be really cool to get a new Asperia ship coming, sort of coming from the Tavaran. That, hey, Asperia got access to this maybe Connie to 600i size ship, 3 to 5 crew. That, hey, the military is going to let us build this. It's a replica of something that we found on Cabal, whichever Cabal planet that was, like the other ones. I think that would be a really sort of lore plausible way for us to get a larger ship, maybe not quite Perseus size, but pretty close. And, to give it the phalanx shield system with, some,
what you're describing is the Jackal. You're describing the Jackal. My favorite.
Maybe a little bit bigger than the Jackal, but yeah.
My favorite in fiction.
The Jackal is a two people, but it had an interior. But the Jackal may be something a little bit larger, like a gunboat size. I think that would make a whole lot of people really happy, and would probably make CIG happy when they cash that check.
All right, next question comes from Gin and Tonic, who asks, size conversation we had came up in chat. What do you guys think of a squad power plant? A member of the squad who carries a specialized power plant backpack to recharge the whole squad in terms of like personal energy weapons. Yeah, why not? I'm always down for more squad support stuff. Having something
like the guy that drops the ammo box.
Yeah.
I mean, it just has to have a limit, right? So you're carrying a battery.
Yeah.
And and then you run into the fact that so it used to be that when you dropped a magazine out of your weapon, right, it went back into your personal inventory. And I think now they drop on the ground, right?
Yeah.
So they have to go back they pop back in your inventory.
Yeah.
So that you could then upload those into your squad buddy's backpack and they can recharge.
Yeah.
And then you can pull them back out and use them. There's nothing wrong with that.
And there's also they don't want to, in the future, they want to make power plants cost fuel. So there's going to be some energy requirement. Right now they're infinite, but eventually they'll require some sort of cost. So they'll run a while, but like if you have a small backpack that's just a power plant, like a size 0 power plant, you drop that down. Yeah, it's a
reactor. Even a reactor needs fuel every now and again.
Yeah.
Well, if they want us to reload our magazines, as much as I'm not a huge fan of the idea, if you can reload physical ammo, how come you can't recharge the dang battery packs?
Yeah, and maybe they start with I don't know, a logistics ground vehicle that doesn't look like a mule, and then maybe
that isn't Drake.
Maybe it comes with something they could experiment with that functionality as a part of that vehicle, and then offload it into some type of FPS device.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that.
I think they also mentioned that they want to add charging stations on ships where you can take your power packs from your energy weapons and put them onto your ship. So you can, instead of having to carry crates of ammunition, you just have to have these places where it makes it less logistically straining, but you also you only can have so many spots for it. And, it's that trade-off.
Yeah.
You can have boxes of ammo, which is just pretty easy to slap into carry with you and slap around, whereas you only have 17 slots for recharging for your power your energy cells, so you're gonna have to make sure you have less than 17, or you're gonna not have as much flexibility with that. So it's all about, as Tree said, player agency.
That would be a great thing for that new Interactables team to make.
All right. Next question comes from Gin and Tonic, who asks, do you really think there's ever going to be the ability to logistically support a brigade-size operation in Star Citizen?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was addressing.
Yeah, you were addressing it earlier.
Before. I mean, if the server can handle it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about can it be done? It's do you have enough people that are willing to
spend 7 hours trying to get, anyone who's tried to do like an armor operation with 100 people, it's a nightmare.
Sure.
It's hurting cats.
Without a doubt. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's even what you want to do. I mean, as long as you can fit that many people and their toys on a server, there's no reason why you couldn't do it, right? And it's just a matter of, I mean, would that ever be something you want to do? Do we ever have a target that's so hard that you need that type of firepower to take it down?
Well, maybe you want to be that target. Maybe you just want to be that death ball where like there's just 5,000 people on that ship. We're not going to assault that ship. We're just going to die. Let's just
I have an idea. What if it like Xenothreat, but ground?
Yeah.
Where the Vandal, or maybe it's a Xenothreat or someone else, have landed or conducting a raid large scale, and the UEE army finally gets some lore, they finally get some credit, they're defending someplace, and you have to there's going to be people that we need the civilian defense force to come in and help out, but not only
the big bad army can't take it.
The army, it's a small garrison here, and civilian defense force come in, land some troops, but more than anything, hey, we need you to they have a limited amount of supplies. Our tanks need more batteries or whatever, need more munitions, and you have to fly your whatever you're using to resupply these ground units through the Vandal anti-aircraft, and bring fighter cover in order to get these supplies to keep the defenders, help them hold the line. And that's the more important part. If you help them hold the line, the event is successful, just like getting the javelin back into back and running. Hooray, we win. And if we don't win, now it's dynamic and we retreat, and blah blah blah. But I think that would be a super fun way to make that event, but include the logistics people, the space truckers,
and maybe that's a brigade size element, but it's NPCs. And,
exactly. Yeah.
It's not players out there just causing havoc and chaos. I mean, and that's another issue, of course. You talk about brigade size fights. What the comms infrastructure would have to be to manage that. And like right now, they have push to talk local.
Yeah.
So
I
mean, it's.
They're going to need a comms infrastructure overhaul just to run a ship. To run a ship the size of a Polaris, you're going to need a overhaul.
And here's the thing, too. It really is a value add for them to do that, because they have to make it good enough for people to want to use it, because that then enables electronic war. If everybody's on Discord or TeamSpeak or what is it, Guild, which allows tiered comms, you can't jam them. But if the in-game comms are good enough that they're usable, they're quality, then that offers the actual EW guy in the Vanguard or whatever other platform you're using to jam comms between ships. And then now they have real problems, right? Now and it creates gameplay because you wipe out a spectrum of comms infrastructure or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's
I just want to local VoIP talk shit to Vandal on the ground.
So you want them to respond, the NPC to respond back to you with like when you insult their mother?
Yeah.
Yes, I want to tag him, do the little point emote thing and
point
say
down.
something. Your mother was a blunt butter knife, because they were knives.
And I know chat and all Americaners is like a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but then people just use Discord anyways if that's the case. And the answer is yes, but you're not always going, if you have a good enough infrastructure, and I see what Kell is saying. So if you have a good enough infrastructure built into the game, people will do that because it's easier. Because it's a pain in the ass to use Guilded or Discord or TeamSpeak or any of those things to set that up properly. And it costs money often to get those size of like where you're dealing with 5,000 people. Even if you're dealing with over 100 people or more, you're going to need some sort of comms infrastructure that's decent. And that's going to cost you some cash on for TeamSpeak and that kind of stuff. And if it's already built into the game, then people will use that instead. And they may have some backups there, but that's a kind of a more of a incentive.
And it's a cultural thing too. Like we as a community, right, should want to be able to be jammed.
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's gameplay. Oh shit, they're jamming me. What do I do? Okay, switch to alternate frequency. Bravo.
Yeah.
Right. Which I mean, that's gameplay, right? You have to think about your comms infrastructure. You have to have, encryption. You have to have all these other things. And of course, they don't have to jam your comms. They could hack in and listen to your comms, and then they know what you're doing, right? And so there's all kinds of. I mean, we as a culture in the game should want that, because it adds challenge to the game. It adds depth to the game, as at least from a PvP perspective. It means a lot, and those players that are really good at that will have huge satisfaction. And then if you can overcome someone doing that to you, right, then you should have huge satisfaction in overcoming that problem that somebody has presented you. So,
all right, let's move on. We'll get through. We're over an hour, and I want to get through this quick. What are your thoughts on how ships are designed? Are they for prolonged duty in the front, or do they need to flesh it out more? For example, CV, DD, out at sea, and logistics.
Well, the biggest thing is we have some ships that are like they are military ships, but now we have them as civilians. But the majority of the ships that we have aren't actual military ships, and we're not playing as military. At most, you might be sort of playing as a mercenary, military contractor type. So your needs as a player are different for Star Citizen than your needs as a player in Squadron 42. Maybe they'll have, the I think it'll be a lot more apparent when you go and walk around those ships in between missions, the differences between those ships. But I think that's also part of why, the cruiser and battle cruiser and the Bengal aren't ownable, but, potentially controllable, is because there's so much more to those ships, and it's a very niche thing. And I think that's why that there's sort of a balance in how many of what we have, even right now and going forward.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's ships are designed right now for their roles, for prolonged work. I mean, yes, but it's also important to remember this is a game. So in the end, to say like prolonged duty, like prolonged duty means a ship is will be functional without having to be repaired for a couple of play sessions. Maybe 2 or 3 days.
And I honestly think CIG has done pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's a balancing part that they don't talk about much, is balancing how much storage you will have.
Yeah. But like your ship's designed for long tours. Like, let's just keep it at the fighter level, right? Your Vanguards, they've built it into the Scorpius now. Those have sufficient storage for food, water, things that you need to survive. They have good range. So, and then you look at the smaller ships and you're like, oh, well, I can fly it with my hydrogen fuel for like 2 hours, and then now I'm in trouble. I need to go back and refuel. So they've actually, as far as endurance goes, they've done a pretty good job of kind of separating out which ships are designed for endurance behaviors and which ones are more parasitic or require some place to go back to. And that I think they've balanced pretty well.
Yeah, that's where those utilitarian ships really shine, is you have cargo space along with your inventory space to carry things that you need to prolong you being out there. But it's just going to depend on where you are. And if you want to get an idea of what these things are going to be like, go look at the star map and go look at how big the systems are. I even have a spreadsheet of it that shows you how big all the systems are in game, and what the sort of spread is of how many are big and how many are small. And we have a lot more small and a lot more extra small and small systems than we do medium, large, extra large. But it is going to you are going to need to bring some things with you if you're going to be making multiple jumps and, you know, going farther out into a system for an extended period of time. But how far out is going to have to scale with how much you bring with you. You know, the farther out you want to go, the longer you plan on being out there, the more of your cargo space you're going to have to dedicate to the things that you're going to need. Because your ship is going to essentially have probability volumes based off what you're doing that influence those probabilities of whether this component or subcomponent is going to fail or, you know, stop working as well. You know, and, you know, some repairs are going to be able to do on a fly and others you're not.
Yeah. All right. So I'll rapid fire a couple of the quick questions and we'll kind of get through the more in-depth questions. Pash Kraken 1971 asks, as a former 12B07, I wonder if Demolitions will come into Star Citizen. Thoughts?
Yep.
Hope
Yes.
so. Yeah, absolutely.
That door needs to get opened.
Give me that seat. Give me that C10.
Yeah. Whatever it's called.
Whatever it is. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Satchel charges would be cool.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to have breaching charges regardless.
Yeah.
And that's a thing already.
Yeah. And then you're going to have, absolutely. And then you're going to have, I think, more generalized military explosives. You can't get away from it.
Yeah. I mean, we have space mines. I wouldn't be surprised if we have personnel mines as well and those sorts of things. And having to counter those mines in an area, especially if you want to control an area, those sorts of things will happen. I think they've even talked about like a Claymore type deployable for like Star Marine and such. So, but yeah, and as chat's saying, there's an entire room dedicated just to explosives on the Legionnaire. So, yeah.
Breaching charges and everything else.
Yeah, breaching charges. Yeah.
All right. Next question comes from Death Trooper 117. What do you think about a Nova tank with an AA gun? I think it's too big. I think you need a smaller.
Too big. I love Tree's idea of a small ship that can, like, it's nothing but a cockpit and a crane, and it can pick up an Atlas or a Tonk and fly it someplace, and it should cost like $150, right? And suddenly all these tank owners that can't move their shit around the verse can suddenly move their stuff around the verse. I mean, I think that would be amazing. But yeah, I mean, too big.
Yeah,
I want to go down. I want AAA smaller.
we need to have something the size of an Ursa rover that can be an AAA, you know, or something the size of an Ursa rover that can be a fighting vehicle of some kind. That's not the Ursa.
The only thing that I think that would be hard to put on a vehicle would be the anti-ship guns, you know, like something that could threaten something larger. Yeah, like something that big. I don't know how well that would translate to a ground vehicle versus having a.
You mean like a Hammerhead or a Polaris or something?
Yeah, something to threaten that big, because like you have the dang Centurion with the quad size 4s. Those are going to be great for your fighters, your small bombers, you know, controlling an area. But if you have a larger ship that's coming in, you know, closer for Atmo, you know, those size 4s aren't going to do a whole lot. They aren't going to have the range. They aren't going to have the
ballista, because the ballista's got that size 5 or size 7 missile on it. Which will take
it's got what is it? 2 size 7s, right? And 4 size.
But that's
5s,
still not going to kill a Polaris. Yeah, this is where I think turret-based, automated or manned, ground-based turret systems come into play. And you know, I know they haven't given us like a extended laundry list of stuff that the Pioneer can set down, but some of it has got to be defensive armaments, and some of it has got to be capital class killer stuff, so that you can't just pancake somebody's base with your Idris and then laugh as you take off into the atmosphere again, right? Something has to threaten those ships, and I mean, I don't think it's not a ground vehicle. It's a installation that's purpose built and expensive.
We already know that Castra, for instance, which was this basically fortress in the sky, was built with 2 gigantic surface to orbit guns. which were designed. They're basically the gun from Star Wars from Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back,
cannon. Yeah. That
you absolutely need that.
They have 2 of them.
Yeah.
And so if those are going to already exist in Castra, having the ability to build them with your own ship, your own base, makes sense. Yes. Would it be comically large and overkill? Yes. But would it be necessary if you're going to deal with players with javelins coming down you? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to build
as long as it scales,
need...
like if you can, if you really need an anti-orbital to get something that can reach you from orbit, okay, you have to work on building that. But for the things that can get you within the atmosphere that are fairly big, if you can get, essentially what would be the equivalent of like, take the dang turret off the Perseus and put it on the ground, make it point up. I don't see why that wouldn't be a thing at all.
Yeah, those giant cannons that are in the Siege of Orison map.
The size 5s.
Those are ridiculous. They're amazing. But
those are size 8s. I think those are size 8 cannons. Those ones
are they really that big?
They're huge.
They're capital class turrets.
There you
go. But what's the counter to that, right? The counter to that is you send in ground forces first with, as you said, Paul, artillery, right? You pound those things into the dirt from range, and then you can bring in other
ships and
assets, other ships and assets. So
it's almost like there's a historical precedent for doing just that.
It's almost like there really are checks and balances in the real world for all of these things that we're talking about, right? I don't know what but anyway, I mean, you could bring in artillery, and then you could follow that up with tanks, right? And then you could attack right on through, and then meanwhile, once you've cleared those larger guns, right, that surface to orbit gun, you can then bring your heavy assault ships down and all that. So there's definitely room for it, but they haven't really kind of explained how a player would access something like that, or it's got to happen, and it's got to come in something other than a Pioneer, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be something. Well, the Pioneer is more of it's changed from being a all-in-one to being more like a fabricator. So it's more designed to just build parts of a base. So if you're going to build like an anti-orbital or even like a size 7 turret, you're going to probably need to have the weapons separate, but then build the actual mechanics of the turret itself that automates, or with each parts that you can.
That's another ship.
Stuff,
Someone's just going to do it. They're going to build a fuck around and a find out in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to be flying along, and its turret's going to be tracking you. We're like, that thing's as big as a city. What is that protecting? And there's not going to be anything there. And it's just because somebody could.
Because someone could.
Oh, yeah. And they absolutely should be allowed to.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, have fun. Knock yourself out.
Then you just drop on the other side of the planet, and you plan your logistics out. You drive around, and then you main gun that thing into the dirt with your tanks or artillery pieces, and then you turn the tables on them, right?
All right. Next question comes from Shemp Pasta, who asks, what are your thoughts on the Vulcan as a supply and support ship?
Really starter.
Yeah.
Like hardcore starter. Like, I'll be curious how much they actually let you resupply with that.
It's there's a
cool concept, but
there's a reason why people call it a tow truck. Because anyone who's ever needed roadside assistance, it's basically that. It's like, I can show up and change your tires, but don't expect it to replace your engine on the side of the road.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's a really good starter. I think when you talk about tactical logistics points in space, right, where you can pop over, you can refuel a little bit, maybe knock out some quick repairs and head back into the fight. I think you absolutely, it's going to be good at that. The question that I have is endurance, and that's one of the questions I always have, is how long can it do that before it has to go to like a operational or strategic logistics point and refuel and resupply itself before it goes back to the tactical point, because it's not that big. No, that's fine.
I love the Vulcan because it's got VTOLs, and I love anything with VTOLs. The limiting factor on the Vulcan, and I think this might get adjusted a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised, but it only has 12 SCU. And it also has the underslung fuel tanks. So it has limited fuel supply and then limited SCU for carrying the things that you would be putting on the drones. And I just went over the Vulcan because we were doing our drone episode for Pathfinders. Go give it a watch. But the drones are able to push and pull. So the way that they described it is the drones will be able to, essentially, if you're, like we talked about, missiles or bombs, on the external things, or, maybe I imagine you'll be able to have it interact with weapons that use ballistics. And then the way it also was described, it sounds like, and I'm not going to, there's no confirmation, but the way it's described, it sounds like the drones will be able to interact with anything that's external. So if you want to carry spare components for a Gladius, that are, or the Saber that are accessed by external hatches, you can do that and replace a damaged component. You can carry more missiles. You can carry more ballistic ammo. You can carry hole patch goo or fuel. But because you only have 12 SCU, which, isn't very much, you really have to pick and choose what you're going to be carrying. And that's why, when we were talking about the logistics and being the logistician of, hey, I know you guys all want to fly your individual fighters that you like, but you really need to pick something and stick with it. Otherwise, I can only support like one or two of you instead of 5 or 6. And that will define how long you can stay out there supporting your people. But the Vulcan really is for supporting fighters, in my opinion, and just keeping, making it so you follow with the fighters, you get to like a staging area, and then they go and do their mission, or fighters and a couple of gladiators or something like that. And then they come back and you rearm them, you patch a few holes, you stock up their tank, they go and do another mission. And then after that, you guys are all going back because the Vulcan is spent. And that's about it. But I think it's still really valuable for that purpose, because I think that's a whole lot of gameplay that you can get out of that. Just by adding one Vulcan, you can get a whole lot more gameplay out of a group of 4 or 5 people and 3 Gladiuses or Hornets and a couple of gladiators to go do something in a place like Pyro, which is longer range but not exceedingly long range. So that's why it's a great starter for those sort of starter hard mode systems where things aren't right next door.
Someone in the chat said Vulcan equals FARP. Yes. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's all, and your logistician needs to understand consumption rates, right? Because that's going to define how long you can stay in combat and how many, right? Depending on what you're trying to do, how many Vulcans do you need? Mm-hmm. Do you need a Vulcan for things like repair and rearm, and that's all it can do? And then, or maybe, it's external fuel, so it's completely separate from the rest of the cargo. So, I mean, maybe, but then maybe depending if you're all energy based, do you need a Starfarer floating around out there in your tactical logistics point as well, so that those ships can keep going? And I don't know that anybody's timed it yet, but I think I got like 2 hours maybe out of an Arrow in hydrogen fuel. So depending on if you survive in a furball for 2 hours, then you're going to have to return at some point.
And that's a point that I've always been making. This is kind of a side point. I have 2 side points I want to make real quickly, which is what a lot of people say, how do you balance how good light fighters are? And the answer is light fighters don't go anywhere. You need to have a huge support network. So it's that scene in Star Wars where they see two TIE fighters and they go, where are those TIE fighters? TIE fighters don't operate this deep in space. There's got to be a base somewhere nearby, kind of concept.
Great example.
If you're out in the middle of Pyro and you see two arrows, you're like, those are that's the
you're
not
going to see them.
Yeah.
You're not going to see arrows in Pyro. They're just floating in space,
Yeah, but I mean, like if you saw arrows in Pyro, it means that there's something supporting those arrows. There's no way they got there on their own.
It's like the inverse of the Kraken commercial. You see 2 arrows, and all of a sudden you see the shadow of the Kraken coming. Dear.
So, and the other thing I was going to point out, because this is a question from the previous one that I mentioned that I completely forgot, which is not really much as a vehicle. What I think we need in Star Citizen is man-portable mortars.
Yes.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart now. Come on. Stop it.
But just because
Remember the mortars from Battlefield 3?
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
And they're fun gameplay. I've used them in Arma. They're great. They're great. They're great usage, and they're great kind of this little support, because if you're not a really good FPS person and you're not really good up in combat, but you want to just destroy something, having a mortar in the background be like, hey, we're under fire in this direction. You can just go, now it's not going to exist. There's nothing over there anymore because we've just mortared it to death. And having it be able to have two people operate a mortar as a kind of a backup.
60 millimeter in theory can be run by one.
Yeah.
But I mean, every player with you carries 1 to 2 rounds. They throw those down. Yeah. And you pick them up and you shoot them.
Yeah. It's simple, point click, doesn't exist anymore. And it's great fun. It requires someone to, like, we talked about the whole like backpack for recharging your energy weapons. This would be the same kind of thing. Like, someone have to sacrifice their backpack to be able to carry a mortar with them where they're going. So,
and CIG, if
you're mortarman, and then your guy with your goggles, who does the
FPS mortar would be a great way, CIG, to experiment with artillery. Please.
The starter artillery.
Yeah, because it's limited. It's got it really does have a limited range. You can play with how you want it to behave, and then you can upgun it over time once you work out the ballistic solution in a 1/10 or 1/6 size world, or however whatever the fractions were that they use. And I think it's going to be hilarious. You shoot a mortar on Yela and it just goes into space.
The other thing about mortars, and everyone who has ever been in the infantry knows this, is because mortars are generally a little bit ways back and they're indispensable for any sort of infantry operation.
Oh, without a doubt.
They get a lot of latitude, so they're the weirdest motherfuckers
they are.
you will ever meet.
I was a mortar platoon leader for the back 6 months of my first deployment. I was Hammer 6, and those were some weird dudes, but we had so much fun. And
so now we know that AttiraKell has some kinks that he hasn't told us about.
Yeah. we were also, at the time, believe it or not, we were the only mortar battery laid in the city of Baghdad at the time. Whoa. It was 04, because it was the beginning of 04. And so we would shoot flares and support a neighboring units, and we had 120s because we were in an army units. They're big boys. And we dug in a firing position and made it all cool World War II tactical, sandbagged the hell out of it. So but we could shoot 7K in any direction. So we would do fire missions for a loom most of the time because it's dark. But occasionally we would do H&I fires, harassment and interdiction. I think is it the I interdiction? Is that right? And we would big areas just to get people's attention and remind them we were around. So it was a good time.
But I mean, I was thinking about, like, what if you had a mortar in the Siege of Orison? That would make things
so just sit back at the taxi drop off.
Yeah, and just drop
with the light gravity. It just has an insane range and just goes thump, and you're just waiting for it.
And you could hit those like those big turrets, because they're big and slow and fixed. You just got to dial it in and just thump those things over, so you don't have to deal with the aircraft. Don't have to deal with, or the spacecraft don't have to deal with the anti-aircraft. Or hopefully when they fix the AI and get a little bit better, you get a big situation where you're everyone's pinned down, and then suddenly it's just that whole area needs to be destroyed. Just have the guy in the back with a mortar fire it off and deal with the big cluster. So.
That would be sick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gib.
All right. Next question comes from Midnight Black SC, who asks, what kinds of Caterpillar modules would you want to see for logistics purposes? I can already say right now, a refueling module.
Like a fuel module. I think a drone module that could do much the same as
it took mine.
The Vulcan, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's really the best I could say. I mean, the refueling module could be kind of standalone, right? And you could even pause and have the dingus come out and the boom, and you come up and you full, and you could even do it off both sides, right? I mean, that'd be fantastic. It's not going to have the same capacity as a I mean, it could have more capacity if you just stack
all of them
fuel pods, right? But let's say you want a kind of a blend. You could just have drones take ammo and repairs, and then you could have boom-based refueling. Yeah. In a medical bay. Let's be real.
Get out of my head, Kel. Get out of my head. All right.
I'm sorry.
Both my answers.
Well, I was also
delete that. Delete that. We're not live, right? Delete that.
Yeah, no. The medical bay would be cool. The medical bay, I think, would have to come with like a one of the modules. It has to be a 2-module thing where one is the docking collar, where your ships can dock to offload their injured or sick people, into the sort of triage room, and then back in the next compartment is where you have your med bed, and maybe you just have one tier 1 med bed, because it takes up a ton of space, or 2 tier 2 med beds, but have a cheap and efficient alternative to the Apollo. Make it so that way your actual med room is modular for the amount of beds, but it's a lot cheaper to have that module on your Caterpillar with the docking collar one than it is to own and operate an expensive Apollo with actual hull plating and stuff.
There's a 5% chance you get some type of infection from the ship.
Yes, yeah, that would actually be really funny. But,
very Drake.
Yeah, yes. The carrot. Yeah, the trade off is that your that time to your post-op time is actually longer because you're recovering from the infection from the lack of sterility. But the other thing is with the drones, if you go back and you look at the Orion, the launch page for the Orion, they had 2 concepts for the drones. The ones that we've always seen that are like that sort of almost disc-looking, flying vertical disc-looking thing. Mm-hmm. And then they had another concept that was, just sort of like a little flying box with these little spindly arms coming off of it. And I kind of want us to have different types of drones, different types of utility drones, and to have, the circular round looking ones are the UE military spec, the expensive good ones. And then, you have your Drake version. That's
the box set.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good enough.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, it leaks oil and the thrusters misfire and everything, but does the same job. But then to be able to use a Caterpillar in modularity to fulfill the function of a Vulcan, but with a lot more storage capacity. You just have one module is a fuel module, another one is your cargo module for your missiles and your repair goo, and the other one is the drone bay with your control stations. But you can hold more drones, and that'd be a super cool way to make the Caterpillar really, because whenever you see the Caterpillar pictured, it's always next to all these other Drake ships. Well, here's your Drake service variant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and to be honest,
the ones.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this applies to anything that kind of has modular cargo containers. So like the Carrack has those 3. Is it 3 or 4?
4.
Oh, God, I haven't flown
3.
my Carrack.
Is it 3?
See,
no, it's 4.
It's because I haven't flown it because it's such a beast to take out in a long time. But I mean, you've got each of those in theory could not be cargo. If you wanted to use that as a more multi-purpose ship, it could be something else in the same way that the Caterpillar, and it could be any ship that has that kind of modular bucketed cargo area. You could just, CIG could give us some real modularity there.
If you made that Drake Caterpillar service station, just make it so that way there's more food options back in the part of the ship that has the table and
Oh yeah,
because it would literally be like a flying Buc-ee's, and Paul knows what I'm talking about.
Yes,
I want a flying Buc-ee's.
Man,
you need to be able to create your own skin and brand it so that you're your own mobile.
A ship to sell the best jerky from.
Yes. And CIG is in Texas, so they already. You've just said that, and someone's come up with a Bucky's-esque character that they can now put into some Kelto is now Bucky's in the future, something like that. You know.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Kelto is the name of the beaver, but it's from a different planet. You know.
It's a Xi'an company, so it could be a Xi'an beaver. You know.
A weird space beaver.
Oh yes, I like it.
All right, so this is another fun one. Wahoo127 asks, do you think we need technicals in the game, or we already have them? And can we all agree that Drake would be a prime manufacturer? Yes. I've said again, and I'll say once more, I want the mule steel. Okay? I want the mule with the back ripped off, and you just put the equivalent of a 50 cal in the back, and you're just done. And it's broken. It's bad.
Yeah.
Size 1.
That's good.
A size 1 or a size 2 that one person in the back can control, and every time it fires, it kicks like crazy. So your entire mule lifts off its back as you fire it. But
you don't need no stinking outriggers.
No, let's be real. The best technicals out there are the ones that have like the 30 millimeter dual cannon ground mounted anti-aircraft guns.
World War II flat cannons. Every time you fire it, the entire superstructure of the truck cracks every time you fire one of those things.
I think there's a place definitely for technicals, no doubt.
Yeah,
I think Drake could make them, but really we just need. I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for another manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I mean, you could do the Drake mule.
One of those little turrets that are at some of the outposts that you can spin around, and it's just a little man-operated turret on a little circular platform. Yeah, you put that on the flatbed truck. On a flatbed. There you go. That's a technical, and it just needs to drive like kind of like a Cyclone, but squeakier.
Yeah, and if you flip it, that dude just dies.
Yeah.
It gets yeeted in a low gravity environment.
Back into orbit. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it.
All right. Next question comes from Ionic Gecko, who asks your thoughts on combat information centers, CICs, on ships, or a ship dedicated to relaying commands to a fleet. How do you see large scale fleet battles being coordinated?
I asked John Crew about this one time. I was at, what was it, 2019? No.
2018.
Right? 2019 CitizenCon.
And I asked about
London
or in Manchester?
In Manchester. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I asked him why they seem to dislike captain's chairs as a concept. And he was like, well, it's your ability to lead as an individual. And I didn't really have a rebut at the time because I was tired and it was the end of the day and we just had a few beers and I was tired. But in reality, it's not just about your ability to lead as an individual, right? A lot of commanders receive a lot of information. And whether you're standing or sitting is irrelevant, right? And I know that a chair takes up a butt ton of space and it's a pain in the butt. So, okay, no chairs. But the concept of an idea of a station for a captain, and really it's not the captain so much as it is whoever's coordinating the fleet, right? So it could be the captain if it's just one large ship in combat. But if you're dealing with fighters and you're dealing with like a support ship, like a Perseus or a Hammerhead, right? There's a commodore or an admiral that's managing that while the captain focuses on his ship. So there is some difference there. But as far as command and control goes, so we've already talked about tiered comm systems, which is a huge deal, right? I mean, and it should be eminently flexible. The engineering team should be able to be on their own comms channel. And then the senior engineer is the only Muldoon on that ship in the engineering section, right, that can talk up to the captain. And maybe he doesn't talk to the captain. Maybe he talks to the XO, right?
The XO is the one who's relaying everything to the captain. So,
Correct. Yeah. And then, and the XO is also typically focused on damage control and things like that while the commander is fighting the ship, right? And then you've got your WEPS officer and your senior WEPS officer and what he's doing and how the ship's and status of ammunition, all these other things. And he's talking to his gun batteries while also talking to the captain. So that's one level. But then you talk about battle space awareness, right? Which is, we struggle with that today, understanding where the enemy is, right? And where we are in relation to them and how we want to fight them. And that, is why reconnaissance exists, right? It is so that we can identify where the enemy is ahead of time. We can put ourselves into a favorable position to engage them. Or if we're defending, we know where they're coming from. We can weight our defenses in a specific location, right? That's what those things are for. As far as visualization, they've got something. It's the bubble, right? The bubble and the Carrack, and we're going to have one, and I think in all the larger capital ships. How that is going to function is anybody's guess right now.
I have an idea.
Go ahead, Drew.
Oh, then go ahead.
So I've been thinking about how you would make this specialized, because like you talked about, we do have the bubble, and you have it on the Idris, you're going to have it on the Javelin. You're like, okay, how do you make this specialized to a command and control ship versus it's just a thing that's on a capital ship? And I think the way that you would have to do it is make it so that this ship, and maybe there's a capital size one, maybe there's a large size one as well. And what you're doing is you're limiting the size allows you to equip a larger size radar, but also a more powerful transmitter. So that way you could, okay, you are not only tracking your elements, here, and here. And the bubble isn't just, you've got a bubble that's around your ship, but then another bubble that's the entire system. And that way you're not only tracking, your units moving around in these directions, but also with your radar and the information, with your radar and then the sensors from your other units, you're able to transmit those things. And without having a ship that does this, you cannot transmit that information those long distances across vast interstellar space. It's sort of gamified, but at the same time, space is really big. And okay, you've got this high powered transmitter that can transmit to this fighter wing that's 100, millions of kilometers away, near instantaneous, that, hey, you can't see this on your radar, but I can see it on my radar. Or we're connected with the Terrapin that's over here, and they can see it, and they're reporting this position, and we can report it back to you, and you can see, it can give you HUD things that you wouldn't otherwise have. And
I dive into this in my video on reconnaissance.
I swear I haven't watched it, but I think that's a sort of start for where you could go with it.
You should absolutely be able to link ships the way you're discussing, so that one radar feeds into another radar. And yes, absolutely. It should just look like another ball inside your ball, right, of censored data. And then as he pushes out, that Terrapin can now see something that you can't, but now you can, because he's linked to your ship, and he's sending you a narrow beam transmission back to you, so that you have situational awareness. And that's how you employ reconnaissance. But then it has to be displayed in a 3D environment for you, the commander or the admiral or whoever, to then make decisions and direct your fleet captains into action. And the challenge with that is going to be is how they choose it. They can't just be red dots, right? Something has to indicate that's a kingship. Something has to indicate that it's a driller. Something has to indicate it's a javelin. And it may be a derpy 3-dimensional rendering of the ship, because that's really all you need, as long as you know that's what that icon means. And you should be able to do things like select for size. Like maybe you don't care about fighters as the admiral. Maybe you only care about bombers and up of a specific size classification or weight classification and up. So retaliators, they matter, right? Brawler ships like the Hammerhead and the Perseus, they matter. They're in a size category. You can see them and everything above that. And then you can then direct your fleet actions. And then you have another position, right? And that's what's so interesting about like the 890, right? Because they have the battle bridge. So in theory, right, if you had two CNCs, one is managing the fighter fight, which is its own problem. And then another is the big capital ship slugfest. And those two guys are talking, but there's screening and there's all these other issues. And then there's, I'm going to go try and put my size 10 cannons on this guy and make him go away. So I don't know.
Make him go away.
Yeah.
Well,
but that's got to be represented in a 3D environment. And there's got to be a station, be it a captain's chair or a place where you stand and hold on so you don't get flung around every time a size 9 torpedo hits your shields, where the guy in charge can see the battlefield. And I think they've got something in mind for this, but yeah. But as far as extending that, yes, I can see the Terrapin, I can see the Ghost, I can see all these ships their radars are linked to mine. I can see what's going on, and then I can put myself in an advantageous location to then attack the enemy when I want to.
That you're speaking my language only because I think that the IFF system that currently exists needs to get drastically overhauled because it's too simple.
Oh boy.
And it's too red does not mean red right now means dead, but it should not have an automatic red pop-ups period. You should have to have some sort of way of scanning the situation. What do you see in front of you? What's the ship? What's going on?
So we have map codes in the Army, or color codes, right? So red is the enemy. Yellow is typically a civilian or unknown. Blue is a American force. Green is an allied force, right? So if our orgs were together, I could tag your entire org as green. My entire org is blue. And then if we know we're going after some pirate org, we could tag their whole org as red.
Yeah, but you need to have reconnaissance. You need to know.
But you would have to have reconnaissance doing that. Absolutely. Yeah. You'd have to have somebody out there telling you where they are so that you can tag them appropriately in their ship signatures.
Yeah. Well, and even if you may not have to manually tag it, you could, if you have, all the org and reputation stuff in game, it could utilize reputation stuff in order to auto tag certain things. You could adjust it if you want.
Yeah. Purchase of data from a data runner that tells you everything you need to know about that org to tag them, auto tag them.
Effectively the frequency of their transponder, and exactly what it is, so you can tweak it so that transponder is always going to be red, so where they are and that kind of stuff. And if you see a unknown transponder, it'll show up as yellow or gray or whatever.
Yellow or gray or something, yeah.
And you need to somehow type that in, and that gives a CIC officer, somebody who's literally an intelligence officer, who's looking at this, go, that's friendly, that's not friendly. This just sitting there mapping and making sure everything is set up properly, because we need more people to do more things, and that's something, especially in a big fleet ops, that's going to be essential to making sure.
And managing that, even at the battalion level, is a couple of people.
Yeah.
So, and that's
and it's a nightmare,
unit, and it's not fun, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it can be fun, I guess. It depends on what you're doing. If people are really dying, it's not fun. But
no.
But as you get higher and higher, right? You look at a division talk, 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers. That's over 100 people managing. And then the guys maintaining the map might be 5, 6, 7, 8 guys who are just responsible for making sure the map is updated, so that the division commander knows where everything is and can make the decision if he needs to. So I think that's definitely a bridge crew position.
Yes.
And they help look at the sensor readings. That's unknown, right? Maybe Johnny the jackass pirate bought a new ship. You don't know about it, right? He scans it down, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to tag that as an enemy now, because I know based on my scans that's a member of this org.
Yeah, or you have someone coordinating. That guy sends a message, say to the ATC or to whoever's in charge of that the fighter group nearby, and say, what the fuck is that? Tell me what the hell that is before we start blowing the hell out of it. And then they have to go out and scan it down, and then they know, oh wait, this is the relays it back, and then it adds more dynamic stuff. And that's I think when we were talking about things like CNC and like electronic countermeasures and electronic warfare, I think that is more where electronic warfare will likely sit in Star Citizen, is disrupting that communication lines, being able to turn off that Javelin's data link. Now suddenly nobody knows what the hell's going on.
Absolutely. Jamming his data link, jamming his ability to see, right? Yeah. So just mucking up the EM the electromagnetic spectrum so that he can't look out, right? And then of course the JAV's EW operators are trying to clear that so that they can see through it, and then they're trying to jam incoming missiles. So that's, and they're trying to reach out and blanket that space so that they're not getting hit. And so it's a constant back and forth with EM operators or EW operators on playing with the spectrum and making sure, and some of it's automated and some of it's not. So
yeah, and there definitely needs to be some balance between that. But I mean, that's the key. Is like CIC we're not near it with Star Citizen right now, but the CIC gameplay is its own full thing that CIG needs to look into, just because there are going to be people like Test who will do operations which involve a game-breaking amount of people, and those people are going to need to have some sort of coordination. And
someone's going to need to herd those cats.
Yeah, that's a lot of cats to herd. Yeah,
and there just isn't enough.
I do like the idea of having a dedicated ship that is, you can do this with your Idris or your Javelin, but you can also do it better with this dedicated ship, or more cost effectively with this smaller one.
Yeah.
You maybe don't need the full Idris's capability. You just need something that's a constellation, in size, in order to, operate two squadrons of people, 2 or 3 squadrons.
Similar to like an AWACS, where it's working as a kind of information, and coordination.
And even when we have huge formations, there's still an AWACS up there directing stuff and passing information and helping out. So, yeah. We actually do have command and control ships in the Navy.
Yeah.
They're just gigantic comms platforms, and they're big, fat targets. But that's what they do. They're
if somebody can track the signals back to, work on the triangulation, that's gameplay in itself.
That said, I do think for player base, I think the Javelin should be able to do most of everything, because that is the largest player-owned ship.
And it's modular.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have a dedicated CNC module.
Oh, well then, yeah, absolutely. If you spend for that, and that's what I didn't realize that. I'm sorry, but that should max out capability. And then, it would be fine to have something like a,
you've tracked the signal back and you find that it's emanating from a Javelin. Now what?
Now what? Right? Yeah. But it would also make sense to have something smaller.
Like 890
and I think it's also just an element of scale, right? So the Carrack is going to be able to do it at some level. The Idris is going to be able to do it at a bigger level. And then you have the Javelin, which for player based is like the best. But somebody's going to take a bangle.
Yeah.
And try and hold it. And if they can get that stupid thing to work, that should just be incredible amounts of situational awareness and understanding. So, I mean,
system wide. That kind of thing would be system wide.
I mean, I already think that the ranges that these large ships can see is too small, right?
Yeah.
Like a Carrack, God bless, passively should have sensors capable of seeing like a quarter of the system. An Idris, probably about the same, right? I think they also have large sensors. A Jav, probably like a third, right? Or half, depending on the system, obviously, because you're talking about, systems
sizes,
of varying sizes. But I mean, in Stanton, right? These are 900 years in the future, highly sophisticated and sensitive collection devices. Now, that's problematic in the current gameplay, but I don't necessarily think it is when we go to larger systems and these are exploration. That doesn't mean you get maximum amount of information too. It might just be a dot on the edge.
It scales down the farther out it goes, as far as the resolution
of what you can see.
Detail.
And then you could know that there's 500 ships over there and you don't know what that is. Right? Maybe it's just a giant cacophony of signal.
Yeah, and they talked about that.
As it comes in, it clarifies and it,
Yeah, they already kind of have that with the sensors, where like if you have a big ship cluster around a bunch of smaller ships, the only thing that comes up is the big ship. And then when you get closer, you can actually it starts filtering the different signals and says, oh, there's more than that, which is what they want to do. So, all right, I think this is the last question. We're working on 2 hours here, which is not the longest we've ever done, but it's still pretty epic compared to what we've had in the past. Midnight Black SC asks, will the Crucible's garage be able to be placed on the surface? And do you think it would be useful as a mobile repair vehicle? Or would it be both equally valuable in their own ways? Basically, will you be able to take the I think it's called the Scarab, the thing, be able to drop it off onto the planet on a planet and have it be like a garage, just like you just drop it down and suddenly it's a garage?
Oh, I hope so.
I
don't think so.
From the development of the Crucible, the answer is yes, it's supposed to be separated. Yes, you're supposed to be able to drop it on the planet and leave it there. The issue is this is all back when repair was very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And repair is much more complicated now. And yeah, you could leave a garage down there, but the garage takes stuff from the cargo, which is in the rest of the ship. So I think and Jake helped clear some of this up, but what we see for the Crucible on the progress tracker right now is it was either the interior was reconcepted or the exterior was reconcepted, and now they're doing the other half. I don't remember which one it was, but it's going to have a pretty substantial concept phase starting pretty soon in order to make it viable for what repair is supposed to be in now. Because when it was first concepted, you can go back and look at that art. I looked at it all and read everything about it because it has drones now. It utilizes drones as part of its repair. But when they were first talking about it, the repair was literally, you're a guy and you're controlling like a little articulating robot arm like you'd see in a car manufacturer, and that was and then you're literally repairing here and stuff magically reappears. And now we have components and replacing the actual structure, the ship and the whole shebang, everything that goes with it. And so repair is a lot more complex. It isn't just hand wavium. And so they did say that you're going to be able to detach it. So CIG is usually pretty good about sticking to what they said. I think that you're going to be able to drop it down and detach it, but I think it's going to have its own inventory, or it's going to need to have its own inventory in order to function. But it's going to be limited in its function based off of how much inventory you leave with it. And then you're taking away the drones, which are part of the repair functionality. The arms are attached to the actual ship, and so really it's going to be a garage that you can do hand-based stuff in, and it should be sizable because it was meant to hold a Hornet, but it's basically just an enclosure with tool benches where you can go get hand tools and maybe some things that you've got on shelves there for repairing a Hornet. What you've got that you can carry as far as repair group for patching holes, hand carryable components and subcomponents, and that's maybe and that's it. If you've got more damage than that, you're probably going to be limited unless there's some other more detailed way that you can support it, and they haven't talked about anything like that. The whole using the arms on the Crucible and the drones actually came from, they decided to use that for repairing larger ships and capital ships, rather than this a scaffolding system that was going to be able to be deployed in conjunction with it was called the Miller ERS, and you were going to have to deploy the scaffold system around a capital ship and then dock with it with your Crucible in order to repair a capital ship. And they said that it would take hundreds of these scaffolds and several of these and several Crucibles or dozens of Crucibles in order to fully repair a large capital ship. So when people are like, oh yeah, you can just use a Crucible to repair your capital ship. No, that was never how it was intended, even way back when. Yeah.
I mean, you could. It would just take forever.
Yeah, forever. Yeah. But I think the landing the Scarab and doing the garage thing, I think, is a great way for supporting your ground vehicles. Yeah.
I hope so.
Because I imagine a lot of your ground vehicle repair will be, grease monkey using your hands.
Mm-hmm. Pull stuff out.
Well, it's all size 0. I think. What? Gosh, it's the Centurion, right? I'm not crazy.
Yeah, Centurion.
That they put in size 1 power plants just for those guns.
Yeah.
So that's like, I think the first ground vehicle that had size 1 components.
Yeah,
because
even that I know.
Even the tank has size 0 components. So yeah.
The size 1 and size 2, or size 1 through size 0 through size 1 or 2 is very, very different. Size 0 is the size of a small backpack that we have now. You can actually see size 0 shield generators. You can actually see the sizes if you go onto the what are they called? The Dumpers Depot. Like Dumpers Depot has like the actual like physical sizes. You can see them. They're tiny. They're small. They're not much bigger than a shoebox. But then size 1 is about the size of a small trunk. And then size 2 is like the size of a desk or the size of a couch. They start getting pretty big as they go on along. So the difference between a shoebox and a trunk is pretty big in terms of components. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So
that's how you get a back injury, and then you call me and I come fix you and give you drugs.
Exactly.
That's why we developed handheld tractor beams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's an entirely different story about, or discussion about the use of tractor beams in Star Citizen and how they're going to improve all of the gameplay. Just because being able to tip your tank over with a tractor beam is going to be a lot better than having to figure out how it just works narratively. Just use a tractor beam. It's just a big thing. You can tip tanks over. You don't need to have an entire rescue vehicle built just to move over the tank.
One of my happiest moments in like 2.8 or 9 was we'd flipped a river and I brought in a Connie and I just like gently nudged it until it was flipped back over. And then he pulled in and we flew off.
Nice. Yeah.
You don't need a tractor beam. You just nudge it with your ship a little bit. You'll be fine.
There's an entire crew that does that for Daymar Rally. Like that, they literally, that's part of what they when they train for Daymar Rally is the support team that just is there to replace and or repair, but designed to like flip over vehicles. So
when people talk about logistics and like, no one's going to want to do that. Really? They're doing
Daymar
it now.
Rally.
Yeah.
Doing it now. Yeah.
So. All right. Well, thank you also for hanging out with us. Thank you for answering all of these questions. And thank you for watching, those who were watching. This is an extra special long version, but I knew it was going to be long just because we get two knowledgeable people together to talk about stuff that they really care about in game, and you're going to hear people talk about this stuff. Make sure that you are subscribed to AttiraKell, all one word, on YouTube. Make sure you're following Tre0311 on Twitch, and you can check him out at the Pathfinders podcast, which is youtube.com/Nazris, Narzis. No, Nazris, Nazris.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you can, if you enjoyed this and you really, really enjoyed this, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that follow button here on Twitch, or you subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever fine podcasting is. To keep up to date with this, and join us live at twitch.tv/TheAstroPub at Saturdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Would love to have you ask your own questions here. And until then, like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.